everyone, Jason here from Off the Beaten Path, and today we're here with the 76 to talk about one of the mods on the 76, the roof rack. So I don't know if you're going to recognise this roof rack. It's a Wedgetail roof rack from the Australian company Tradesman Roof Racks. This video is going to cover off the install and the assembly and sort of the whole 9 yards, as well as a comparison. But I know a lot of you just want to know, is it any good and do I like it? So we're kind of doing the conclusion at the start of this video, and if you're interested to see how to put it all together and that sort of thing and what's involved, then watch the whole video please. So first of all, shout out to Wedgetail and Tradesman Roof Racks. They did give me a media discount on this one, which I really appreciate, and that was after I approached them, having done some market research and selected this roof rack for my vehicle. So what are my thoughts? I love it. Has only just been installed, haven't had a long-term test of it, so look, 6-12 months down the track I'll do a long-term review and see if I still feel the same. But right now, based on what I learned about this roof rack while I was assembling it and installing it, I really like it. So what do I like about it? Couple of things, more than a couple actually. So I like the quality. The extrusions are really thick and really strong, and it just feels super solid. And the way it mounts to the gutters is really solid. The whole thing just feels much more rigid and solid and strong compared to the Rhino rack that I had on the Padge, and that's my impressions. It was pretty easy to put together. The other thing, so strength, quality, durability, that's one thing I like about it. The other thing I like about it is it's quite low profile. I've measured it. The highest point of the roof to the underside of the roof rack, there's 30 millimeters. Just 30 millimeters, so it's quite low profile, which is also a really good thing. Talking about low profile, now wind noise is something that roof racks are always known for. I'm going to say this has less wind noise than my Rhino rack. I don't know whether that's because of the shape of the bars. So this roof rack has horizontal bars, which you'll see, and they've got an aero style profile at the front. That's probably a factor. The wind deflector that comes with it, so you can probably just make out the Wedgetail logo there on the front. That's a wind deflector, bolts up underneath, really easy to install. I do suggest you install it before you mount it on the car though, because there's not a lot of space under there. That wind deflector I think really makes a big difference. The other plate you can see on the front here, where you can probably guess what mounts on there, and it's not there yet, so that'll be down the track, something I didn't have on the Pajero. So I did pick up a few extra accessories with this as well. So low profile, strong. The other thing I like about this, one of the things that drove me nuts with my Rhino rack was, like a lot of slot loading systems, you have the areas at each end where you can put the new little lugs in. They only go in one way. So if you want to mount something in the middle and you've got a roof, you've got an awning bracket or something, you have to undo the bolts, slide the little weights along. Absolute pain in the ass. Drove me mental, particularly when I was prepping for the variety trip last year and I had to put a whole bunch of different things on the roof. The amount of time I spent, you know, sliding those little weights along and unbolting things and rebolting things, that's not a thing with the Wedgetail racks. So they have a very large channel. You can insert those weights at any point, you rotate them 90 degrees and then do them up. I really like it. It's a simple system. So far I've mounted some eyelet hooks up there, which will be in this video. Super easy to install. So the mounting system is something that I really quite like as well. Now the other thing I like is the quality of the accessories. So I did, as you mentioned, that mounting plate on the front, I got that with the roof rack. I got some eyelets because I know I'm going to use them for mounting the swag. The other thing I got was awning brackets, because I've loved my 270 awning on the Pajero, and it's definitely something that I'm going to put on this vehicle as well. I don't know what 270 awning I'm going to go with just yet. I'm still doing some research on that, but I'm almost certainly going to have a freestanding 270 degree awning on this vehicle sometime in the future, probably after I sell the Padge and can afford it. So I pre-bought the brackets with that. That was something I did to save on freight, because they were already charging me freight to send the rack out. So it made sense just to bundle in some accessories that I knew I was going to want. Now, you see with various rack manufacturers, these aftermarket brackets, they're like 300 bucks. I can't remember exactly how much these were. I will put it up on the screen. They're around 300 bucks, which seems like a lot. My last 270 awning was mounted with the standard brackets that came with it, and that was okay. But it was a lighter awning, it wasn't freestanding. So you look at those L brackets that come with your awning and you go, why am I paying 300 bucks for them? Let me just say, the brackets that I got with this roof rack that were worth around $300 are nothing remotely similar to those standard brackets. These things weigh a good probably 3 kilos each. Heavy plate steel, hugely reinforced, really strong, really good quality. I think Wedgetail rate them for awnings up to maybe 32 kilos or something. It's on the website. I'll double check and put it on the screen. The point is, yeah, they're not remotely the same thing, guys. Okay, so look, that's my summary. I really like it. It fits well. It you know, factors in choosing this were weight. So it's lighter than the similar Rhino rack or front runner rack. I'll go through all that in a little bit more detail in the video, but weight, strength, price were all the reasons that I went for this, and I'm really happy with it. So let's get into the video, more detailed comparison. In terms of assembling this, seriously guys, if I can assemble this thing, put it together and get it mounted on the roof, kids help with the install, anyone can do this. Tool wise, you need some basic tools. You need an Allen key. I recommend getting a set of those T-handled ones. I think you need the 4mm and the 5mm for this from memory. You can pick them up from just about anywhere. I got a set from Super Tube Auto. I think they're about 20 bucks. Really good investment, and stuff like this that has Allen keys, heads, hex heads, just so much easier on your hands. So definitely get a set of T-handled Allen keys, hex heads, whatever you call them, and a basic socket set. I think the biggest one is a 13mm that you need, down to maybe a 10 or 11mm. So with those basic tools, the other thing that's handy to have actually is a rubber mallet, which I also already have, just to adjust when you're actually putting the frame together, as you'll see in this video. So look guys, thanks for watching. As always, like this video if you liked it. Let's get into a bit more detail about this roof rack and the install. So when it came time to look at choosing a solution for the 76 series, I looked at the usual suspects, which was Rhino rack and front runner. Now I didn't look at the ARB base rack, only because I don't know a lot about it. From what I understand, the channels are on the side of the extrusions, so none of my existing accessories would work with that, I don't think. So I don't get the ARB base rack, so yeah, I didn't consider that. And then in doing my research looking for roof racks, I found another one, Wedgetail, which I'd never heard of. So Wedgetail roof racks are made by an Australian company called Tradesman Roof Racks. They've been making roof racks for years and years, and their factory is just down in Melbourne. So I did have a close look at them as well. Now, in terms of looking at a roof rack, what were my considerations around what were going to be the factors I was going to decide around? First up was size. 76 is a decent length vehicle, and straight away in looking at the roof racks, I found that there were many different lengths out there. So I wanted something that was going to cover the most amount of roof space. So in looking at that, out of the three I was looking at, I found pretty quickly that the front runner rack was the longest at just under 2.4 meters. Next was the Wedgetail at 2.2, so 200 mil or so shorter. And then the Rhino rack was actually the shortest at 28 millimeters, so just over 2.1 meters. So when looking at the size of the rack, the next obvious consideration is width. And again, they're not all the same width. So the widest was actually the Wedgetail rack at 1450 millimeters, followed by the Rhino rack at 1426, nearly the same. And finally, the Frontrunner rack at 1345 millimeters. So in terms of area of rack that you have available, what I found in terms of area was that the Wedgetail rack was actually the biggest. It provided 3.19 square meters of area, followed very closely by the Frontrunner at 3.18. So they're effectively the same. And then the Rhino rack was actually a little smaller at 3.03 square meters of area. The next logical consideration was weight, because we all know having too much weight up high was never going to be a good thing. So looking at the weights, the Frontrunner and the Rhino rack were very similar at 42.1 and 43 kilos respectively. The Wedgetail rack was markedly lighter at 30 kilos, which I was pretty surprised about. Now look, all three racks had a load rating for the 76 of 150 kilos, with an asterisk saying check your roof load rating, which on the 76 series I believe is actually 100 kilos. So load rating sort of didn't come into it. They all had a pretty good warranty. Rhino rack was 5 years, and Wedgetail and Frontrunner were both limited lifetime warranties, which apply to the original purchaser only. Now the next thing that I wanted to look at was how they actually mounted to the vehicle, because again, 76 is the first vehicle I've owned with a gutter down the side, and the idea of having just 3 or 4 mounting points along that gutter so that any load actually on the roof rack is only spread across those points. So you got multiple point loads instead of a spread load, didn't really excite me. So I was gravitating towards the Rhino rack system, being familiar with that from the Pajero. But what I found is that the Rhino rack spine for the 76 actually is a spine that runs the length of the rack, but it still has those point load points. The way it's shaped, I'll try and put a graphic up here on screen somewhere so you can see what I'm talking about. So it doesn't actually spread the load. And it was a similar story with the Frontrunner rack. What I found when I looked at the Wedgetail is they actually have a spine system, if I can call it that. I don't think they call it that, but it runs the full length of the roof rack and sits in the channel all the way along, and then the clamps clamp to it. So you still have those discrete clamps, but the actual load on the roof rack is spread across the entire channel. So that made a heck of a lot of sense to me, just in terms of limiting fatigue on the roof and the roof structure, particularly those gutters, for the vehicle. And obviously the last thing to look at was price. So no surprise, Frontrunner was the most expensive, and I'm talking recommended retails here. You can probably buy them for better. But the Frontrunner rack was around $2,700. Rhino rack was around $2,300, maybe a little bit less. And the Wedgetail was just over $2,100, so a little bit cheaper than the Rhino rack. So for me, in this case, it was a bit of a no-brainer. Got a rack that's Aussie made, that is the biggest rack in terms of area, has a channel system, has a great mounting system that spreads the load, and is also the lightest rack, and comes with a really good warranty. So it was a no-brainer for me to go for the Wedgetail, and that's the rack that's going to be installed on the 76 series. So let's get into that assembly and install video. Now, full disclosure here, guys, once I did my own research, I approached Wedgetail. They did come to the party and sponsor this a little bit, so I did pay for the rack, but I did not pay full retail. They have given me a bit of a discount in return for making a video about the rack and my thoughts on it. Yeah, I approached them though after I'd already selected the product and gone through this process. So yeah, really, really grateful to Wedgetail and the other companies that have come on board with the build on the 76. It's allowed me to progress it a little faster than I would have otherwise. And I hope you guys are all enjoying this content. So let's get on and assemble and install this roof rack. Hey guys, Jason here from Off the Beaten Path. We're about to start unpacking and assembling the Wedgetail rack for the 76. So this is how it comes. I got 5 boxes, so this one here behind me, this flat one, and then these 3 long boxes. Now I did buy a few extra accessories along with this rack, so keep in mind you probably won't get this many boxes if you just buy the rack. I should give a shout out to Wedgetail, thank them for coming on board and supporting this video, the channel, and me. I did pay for this, but I didn't pay full price. They did give me a bit of a discount, as I said in the introduction to this video. So let's get these boxes open. I'll show you what I've got here, show you the parts, and then let's see if I can figure out how to put it all together. Okay, so I've unpacked all the boxes. This large plate here, I believe, is for the light bar that I'm intending to mount at the front of the rack. So that's what that is. These here are about the chunkiest awning mounts that I've ever seen. The photos on their website really do not do these justice. These additional pieces mount on top like so, for extra reinforcing. Each one of these weighs a good couple of kilos. They're pretty thick. I don't know how thick exactly. That curve there is where they set over the edge bar on the rack, and these side bits wrap around the bars. Look, they are pretty awesome. We've also got this bag here, which is filled with rubber strips which insert onto the bars. We've got this piece, which is a wind deflector, and then I believe these 2 parts here are the side rails. So this is how it's come out of the box. So all these pieces were individually wrapped in bubble wrap. These pieces were bagged and then wrapped in bubble wrap. The other pieces of metal there are wrapped in the foam. These look like the crossbars and the long side and edge bars. In addition to that, good selection of nuts and tie down pack of eyelets there. Also some additional mounts here. I'll figure out what they're for, and some instructions. So I'll start unpacking this. There's a picture there, the instructions. You can see how the roof rack mounts go together. I'll start unpacking this, sorting the parts out, and we'll go from there. So the main components of the rack are all unpacked. There's the long boards. These are really nice and solid, that actually clamp onto the rails and that the rack sits on. Really solid bit of steel. We've got 8, we've also got 8 horizontal slats, and then the 4 pieces, front, back and sides, that make up the main frame of the rack, corner pieces and bolts to put it all together. So yeah, I am going to read the instructions on this one. and then we'll start laying it out and putting it together. Okay, so I've got all the parts sorted out. Now, I recommend logically laying these out. Let me show you this as best I can. This is one of the long extrusions. This is one of the corner pieces. Corner pieces have a flat section on the bottom side, and in the corners there's these recesses here, and that's where recessed nuts go in. Now, the corner pieces go into the extrusions like this. They're a fairly snug fit, but first we actually need to put the nuts in. So let me grab one of those. Okay, so as I was saying, the nuts, you can, don't know if it'll come through on the camera, but those recesses in there are shaped exactly like the hex head of these nuts. You just drop them in there. Once they're in there, they sit flush, and they won't actually turn. And then it's just a matter of knocking all the pieces together. So, as I said, it's a bit hard to show this on camera, so look, the instructions say logically to do this on the floor. So that's not quite fully seated, but once it's slotted in there, the nut actually can't come out. So we'll just, we'll do a couple more. So again, just looking at the long piece here, the other end, I've got one of these. This goes in, so as I said, you've got to make sure that you put those nuts in. You can see it sitting in there before you slot it into place, and then once you slot it in, they seat nicely. So I'll just do a couple more. You probably don't need me to show you all of those, so I'll get the other two corners in the other long piece and we'll go from there. Okay, so once you put all the corners in, you end up with something that's starting to look like a rack. Now, you fix those corners in with black hex head screws. These guys, the cool thing is, these already come with the washer and spring washer already on them, just ready to screw into those concealed nuts that are inserted into the corner frames before you push the extrusions on. So now these these little black screws, they're a 5mm hex head. This is what the frame screws together with. I got one of these T-handle Allen keys, which will make that job a little bit easier. Now the key is not to over tighten these. The spring washers do their job and hold it together, so the trick is not to over tighten. Okay, so once you've got the frame together like this, you turn it upside down and you can see these slots in the frame here. This is where the cross beams bolt on each side, and then there's spots at the front there for accessories. This is the profile of the cross beams. This is the top and this is the bottom, and the curved surface goes towards the front. So in this case, I'm going to say this end is the front of my rack. So we lay it down like so, and then slot it into place. So once in place, the bars sit horizontally like so. Now, the plates for these are a lot bigger than your typical Rhino rack, front runner rack ones, because the slots here are quite a lot larger. So they go in sideways, and then you rotate them and then push them into place. And then your screws here bolt in. Now, doing these up, what I found, that's just a plastic pry tool. These channels are really deep, so the blocks aren't the full thickness of the channel. I found it really quite helpful doing it upside down like this, which is the logical way to do it and the way the manual says, to use that pry tool to lift the blocks up, because the threads on the nuts are not overly long. They're long enough, but not overly long. So that's how I lifted the blocks up to get the screws into place. So I'm almost halfway through. Look, it's very doable. Doing it here on the floor inside because I've got the space. One thing I would say is that it would be twice as quick and half as easy if those blocks that clamp the end of the rails inside the channel were the full thickness of the channel, so you didn't have to lift them up when assembling the rack upside down like this. That would make a huge difference, and I don't think it'd cost that much. So there's the rack all assembled with the 8 cross pieces, all the corner pieces screwed in. So I've just got the base plates that go onto the vehicle, those side panels there to bolt on, and then the next step will be probably putting it on the car. Okay, so I did say I was going to read the instructions, and I did. Now, contrary to what I was going to do, which was fit the rails loosely to the platform at about the width of the car, gutters, and then lift it onto the car and then tighten everything up. That's the way I've seen other platforms fitted in the past. The instructions actually, which makes sense, recommend fitting the long channels, or the long pieces that support the rack, to the channels and clamping them on the car, and then mounting the rack on top of that. Now that's going to be both a little easier and more difficult. Easier in that the little blocks that clamp everything together with this system, gravity will actually be sitting them in the bottoms of the channel, so it should be a little easier to line the bolts up. More challenging because it's going to have to be done on the roof of the car, but at the same time it'll have a platform there to sit on. So that's what we'll be doing. Recruited some helpers for this last bit. So these are the side rails that actually sit in the gutters. So the first thing to do here is this rubber that comes with it. You have to put this on here. So it's a bit of a snug fit, which I guess is what you'd want. You don't want it coming off. It doesn't help that the rubber is fairly twisted when you get it from packaging. You can see this part here, how twisted that is. I would definitely recommend heating it up just a little bit would make this job a heck of a lot easier. But yeah, basically, and this is just a pry tool that I've actually found really helpful for separating the two pieces of the rubber and opening it up a little bit as I'm trying to press it down onto the steel here. So it goes on alright, as you can see, and this is obviously to protect the gutters in the car. You do have to watch that, especially in these early stages, that you don't slide it along. That's a bit of an issue, but once you get it on here, it goes on pretty well. Alrighty, well, we'll finish this bit and then I'll show you how the bolts goes on. That just took a few minutes. As you can see, got the protective rubber all the way along there. Actually had a little bit spare, as you might expect. But yeah, if that was a bit warmer, it's pretty chilly inside. If that was a bit warmer, that would have been a lot easier. Pry tool was definitely a lot easier to use to separate it than your finger, so that was something that was certainly handy to have. So all we need to do now is put these little plates on. I'll show you how one of them work. So the way these work is these nuts actually sit inside the frame like that. That's a hex cut, and we'll lock them in place. And then your plates sit over the top. So you just put your bolts through your plate like so, and then you screw it into the nut. Obviously just doing them loosely for now, but then they will sit on there like that and they will clamp to the gutters on the car. So we'll put a few more of these in and then we'll go and mount these. So the way the instructions say to do that is to actually mount these in the gutters on the car and then screw the platform on top. Alright guys, so yeah, this is what it looks like when you start putting it on the roof. So we've actually done the other side first so that I had some idea what I was doing. It was definitely helpful having 3 pairs of hands to do this, because what you need to do is get it up, sit it in the channel, align your clamps, and there's actually some, it's a bit hard to see, but there's some soft foam protective tape that you put around the outside of the chrome work there to help protect it, and then you need to get it seated in the channel. So as I said, we've already got the other one up, so what we're going to do is just tighten this up so it'll sit here by itself, and then we'll double and triple check the measurements, because obviously the important thing is that these horizontal stays are aligned so that when you put the square rack on top, the bolts will all actually line up. So yeah, let's just tighten these up a little. Now, you got that, Arthur?
Yeah.
Yep, you're holding it?
Yes.
Now, as long as the nuts are seated in the steel at the back, shifter will just tighten these up nicely. Now, okay, so next installment of installing the roof rack. Now, the big plate on the front here that we've mounted, that is a light bar mount, so that's a non-standard accessory. But this piece here is actually a wind deflector, and that comes standard. So these front bolts here are Allen key head bolts, and they go into lock nuts that come with the wind deflector. You can reach under there quite easily and tighten them up. They're pretty good. And the back 4 that hold the light bar mount on, they bolts that with compression washers that bolt into the channel. The end ones, you can hold the little plate they screw into with your fingers pretty readily. Center ones are a little bit tricky. So what I actually did with those, I used my T-handled Allen key to hold the weights in place while I tighten those up with a ratchet socket. But yeah, they're all on there, really firm and not going anywhere. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually mount the longitudinal spine pieces on the rack inside here, and then carry it all out to the car. It's not necessarily the way that tradesmen or Wedgetail recommend doing this, but we just think it's going to be easier because yeah, we had trouble obviously last time. Now, since the last time, I have found another video on the Tradesman website that recommended actually putting the bolts and the weights through the spine portion, so that's them over there, so that they're in place, and you just got to sort of maneuver them into the channels. But we're going to try it this way. It makes the whole thing a bit heavier, but it's not a super heavy roof rack anyway. So let's we'll get those on, and we'll go from there. So this is how the spine bolts on. So the block is in the channel there. Now the blocks won't actually spin 180 degrees or 360 degrees. They've got raised tips on either side, so they lock. And these bolts have got large washers and then a pretty solid compression washer as well to hold them in place. So got the first couple in there, and as I said, so we're putting this on upside down inside here, and then we'll turn it over, lift it onto the car and adjust as necessary. Okay guys, well, we've got the Wedgetail rack on, we've evened it up, tightened up the bolts underneath, and we've seated these, and we're just going to tighten these up now with our ratchet. So for us amateurs, it ended up being a bit of a mission, but we've gotten there. These are all seated nicely and they tighten up easily. Once you've got them finger tight, the nuts that are seated into the recessed into the hex clamp on quite nicely. And these don't have to be super tight, they just need to be firm. That's about it. All right, let's do the back one. We'll alternate with these. Certainly going to make a world of difference having roof rack storage on the car again. Now, I don't know if it would have been easier in the end to do it the way the instructions in the video found, but this wasn't too bad in the end, where we put the spine on inside and lifted it on and then adjusted the rack, and then we've tightened everything up on the car. So that for us hasn't been too bad to do, and it's worked pretty well. So yeah, the wind deflector on the front here comes standard. This other platform here is a platform for mounting a light bar, which is something that I've planned for the future. So given how much space there isn't under there, it made sense to buy that with the rack and mount it ready for the light bar to go on there. So looking forward to that. And yeah, that wind deflector is basically perfectly in line. If you come around to the side, you can see the line of the windscreen and the line of that wind deflector line up pretty well. So that's what I've used to position the rack. I don't know if that's correct or not, but that's what I've done. And yeah, we'll just tighten up the other side and we're done. So thanks guys. Well guys, if you watched this far, thanks for watching. It's a long video for a roof rack video, but I wanted to show you the whole install and the whole process. As I said at the start, which was actually filmed at the end, really happy with this. Here's a bit of B-roll, not fantastic B-roll, but to show you the rack in situ. Looking forward to using it, and look, I will do a longer term review once I've been using it a little longer. And I'll bring that to you guys at that time. So yeah, thanks for watching. Like this video if you liked it. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments down below, and think about subscribing. And these days you can also support us financially if you want to do that, and you're able at buymeacoffee.com/OTBP, off the beaten path. Catch you in the next video guys. Thanks.